Sap sampling versus tissue sampling. What's the difference? Which one's better? How are they performed? And what results can you expect from each? That's what we're digging into in this episode of Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve podcast, where real farmers share real insights and real results to help you improve your farming operation. This episode is brought to you by Simon Innovations. Protect your crops and maximize yields with a full lineup of innovative precision tools engineered to enhance the efficiency and accuracy of your sprayer. Visit simoninnovations.com and start getting more ROI out of your sprayer. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic example of brilliance coming to you with my guests. I've got Clint Frese and I've got Mike Evans. They are both in the ag business, agronomically attuned. And I'm going to let Clint actually remind me the name of his company. It's Bio something. But anyway, the point is we're going to talk about sap sampling versus tissue sampling. Sap sampling is a little newer on the scene. Tissue sampling, frankly, was new to me when I joined with Extreme Ag. Well, we had a request from Paul Byer. He's one of Extreme Ag members. He's actually been a client of mine. And I'm like, you know what? That's a great suggestion. We should dig into this topic. So anyway, Clint, help me out here. We know Mike Evans works for Integrated Ag Solutions and also agronomist for Kelly Garrett Land and Cattle. You're in Illinois and your company has Bio something, and you're going to help me out.
Our company's Bioag Management. I farm as well with my dad and brother. So we've been doing tissue for a long time and have been doing sap the last 2 years.
Okay. Mr. Evans told me that this is the third year at Garrett Land and Cattle that they're doing tissue sampling, or sap sampling. All right. So the question was, what, tissue sampling has been something we've been doing for what, a decade?
Yeah. 10, 15 years probably.
Okay. So the knock on tissue sampling, Chad Henderson does a big thing on this. He says you shouldn't tissue sample. He says you should tissue sample. We did a big episode about this a year or so ago down to this farm, and it was a lot of fun. Problem with tissue sampling is you're not really supposed to be making adjustments tomorrow based on what the tissue sample that you pulled last week and sent to the lab says, because you might be behind it. That's one of the knocks on tissue sampling. One of the other knocks on it is it's more of a long-term plan. You're looking at it and saying, okay, this field over the last years has taught us this. So you tell me your thoughts, Clint, on tissue sampling, and I want to get it from Evans, and then we'll say what the next evolution is, and I think you're going to tell me sap sampling.
Yeah, I mean, tissue sampling is tissue sampling is a look at the past. So it's what's stored in the actual leaf. It's actually the process that the leaf's actually dried. You put it in cardboard bags when you ship it. They're a little easier to take than sap. They require a little less work, but they're a look at the past. So I always use tissue as one of the big takeaways I had with tissue was we are not delivering, like in our area, we have a high clay soil. We wasn't delivering K to the plant, and tissue picked that up. And so we made some adjustments with K rates and going to some in-season K management, and it was a big deal for us. So definitely has its place, but I think it's more how do we prepare, get better at the following year than maybe calibrating in season.
The people that are joining us from like the Panhandle of Oklahoma, where our friend Galen works and lives, are saying, did this guy just bitch about his soils and he's in Illinois? I mean, let's face it here, Clint, you just complained about your soils and you're in Illinois. I mean, there's people that would kill for what you have. All right. So the point is what I just heard there, and Evans, you can help me out. He said, all right, I do the tissue sampling, but I do realize it's what the plant looked like a week, 10 days ago. It's not like I'm going to make a fertility application now based on that, but it's more of it's going to help me with my long-term plan. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, that's what tissue is. It's a historical look at your crop, and we've managed it that way. With Kelly and tissue sampling at his farm, that was, we always looked at it that way, looked at trends going into the next season and made adjustments going into the next season. But, what we've learned is agriculture and agronomy moves a lot faster than trying to be 2-3 weeks behind or even a year behind.
All right. Do you still tissue sample, or have you made the move to sap sampling? Is there still a place for both, I guess, what I'm asking? Mr. Evans.
Yeah. We'll tissue every once in a while, especially early on, just to see what the stored nutrients are, get a glimpse shot of that, because you still kind of want to keep an eye on that, where sap's more of the mobility in the plant. Tissues give you stored nutrients. So you still want to keep an eye on that, make sure everything's up to par, but we just don't do as regularly as we used to.
Clint, same thing?
Yeah, we pretty much completely moved to SAP. Do a little, like Mike said, just do a little bit just to make sure, especially early on, just to make sure that we was calibrating well. And there's some crossover there, but it is a different story with SAP for sure.
All right. So to tissue sample, you go out, you pull the leaves. Mostly this is done on corn. Do you do this on soybeans?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Remember, hey, the listener can't hear you nodding your head, Clint.
Yes, we do. We do
All
do
right.
that. We do it on
Wheat, oats, you can tissue sample everything, right?
Yep.
And then the value there is, like I said, on a trend line, you're saying, okay, over the last 3 years, we've discovered that in this field, or across our whole cropping system, around July 15th, this happens, and you can kind of have that historical thing. So it's kind of like going to the doctor with regular checkups, but you don't make big adjustments. You pull the leaves, you put it in a cardboard sack or a bag, and you send it to a lab. That's how you tissue sample, right?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. How do I sap sample?
Well, there's a different protocol. You actually take two sets of samples. You get a new leaf and an old leaf. So you take the most viable old leaf. Usually it's 2 to 3 leaves above the bottom of the plant, and then the newest, most fully photosynthetic leaf at the top. So that's usually about 2 leaves down from the last or the newest emerging collar, and you send those in, and you actually only take out, the middle 6 inches of that leaf, but you have to put it in a Ziploc bag, and you got to keep it cool because that sap is sensitive to different environments, different temperatures. So you keep it cool, and then you overnight it, which is different than tissue, in a cooler pack to the lab, and then they get it.
So the advantage here is, well, first off, you said middle 6 inches. The soybean leaf wouldn't be the case. So same sort of protocol if I'm doing another crop other than corn, meaning I take a leaf that's a couple up from the bottom, and then the most viable, the newest leaf, and same thing.
Yeah, beans, you'll take the trifolia and the petiole. They'll want the whole piece.
Hey, one of us at this table is not a botanist. What was it? Try what? A trifecta and a what?
Trifoliate.
Okay, what's that mean?
That's the 3 leaves that come out on a bean plant, right?
Okay.
The legume or whatever.
The top. Okay. So
Yeah.
the trifoliate, and then you take the other one?
The stem of the leaf, the petiole.
Okay. You know what, Clint? Evans kind of likes it when he outsmarts me once in a while. He kind of gets.
That's not that hard, Damien.
I got that. He can't say the word molybdenum. That's like the only thing I got on him. He can't say that. All right. So you send this in, and I'm guessing what I'm hearing, Clint. The one advantage is it's more real time. I mean, I pulled it, and it's at the lab tomorrow.
Yep. We get it. Usually, New Age Labs does an awesome job. Usually 2 days from when we send it, I got results back, sometimes 3. So that's awesome. And I think it's a snapshot of, 10 to 14 days ahead. You've got that much time to decide, hey, do I have it in my budget, or do I want to go after a specific problem that SAP points to? So you've got a little bit of time to make an in-season diagnosis. And I think the powerful part, like Mike said, about pulling an old leaf and a new leaf on all our mobile nutrients, so chloride, sulfur, phosphorus, potassium, mag, and nitrogen. We all know when we go out in the field and we see the plant cannibalizing itself, so the leaves are being taken and used to support upper growth or to support the ear. We see that way before it ever happens. So it gives us a different, idea on, for me, what am I going to do with base rates? If I'm putting 200 pounds of DAP out in the fall, but by V8, I'm already phosphorus deficient and I'm already mobilizing from the top to the bottom, how am I going to make a change to better my ROI or better my phosphorus usage, as an example?
All right, Mr. Evans, you're nodding your head. You're agreeing with all that.
Yeah, I mean that 2-week lead time is exactly what I see and what Clint's saying. I mean, you can kind of plan out like, all right, we're going to be phosphorus deficient in 2 weeks, and we need to get on top of it. And if the micronutrients are out of balance, we got 2 weeks to get in there and get some kind of corrective application made.
Okay, so from the standpoint of timing, I want to talk about the timing of it because it seems like it's a big improvement on the timing, and I want to get into that. Before I do, I want to also remind our listeners about our friends at Nature's. Nature's is one of our friends and business partners here at Extreme Ag. They are focused at Nature's on providing sustainable farming solutions to help you maintain your crop's potential today and also to pass on that farm to the next generation. At Nature's, they have high-quality liquid fertilizers powered by Nature's Bio-K to target specific periods of influence throughout the growing season. You hear our guys talk a lot about spoon feeding versus flinging, flinging the stuff out there in the fall or in the spring. It's all about spoon feeding. It's about targeting periods of influence during your growing season so that you can help your plants mitigate plant stress and enhance your crop yield. Most importantly, boost your farm's ROI. Nature's, N-A-C-H-U-R-S, natures.com. It's not just the timeliness, because the point is, the sample gets there faster. Well, you could overnight a tissue sample also. It's the difference. What I'm hearing is the sap is live. The tissue, the sap tells you what's actually going through the xylem and the phloem. See that, Clint? I just used words that are sort of botanical because I wanted to make sure that Evans knew I did take plant biology. The sap tells us what is actually going on in that plant right now versus the tissue is laid down a week or two prior. Is that kind of what I'm thinking? And here, am I getting this right on the timeliness?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a snapshot of what's actually flowing. And then when we see, the reason we pull the old is just to see on the mobile nutrients what's being pulled out to support new growth. So that's been huge in our mind. And then I think the other big pull ahead with sap is it sets a very high ceiling for yield. And I don't necessarily know what that ceiling is, but I think one thing me and Mike's been frustrated with is we want to have a good looking sap sample. And sometimes when we get halfway through the growing season or into reproduction, it's tough to have a good looking sap sample. So for instance, like most of my growers in my area or most of the farmers I work with, they're 50% deficient in phos at R1 at tassel. So a lot of that corn last year was 250 to 60 bushel corn at a 50% deficiency level between old and new growth. So it's not about, for me, it's not about how do we get to 0% deficiency between old and new. It's can I get to 40% deficient at R1 next year? And it's about that time value, extending the increased nutritional flow later into the growing season and keeping that premature cannibalization from happening.
Got it. So the issue is you think that even though, okay, most people don't even tissue sample. And now you're saying the next evolution is, so like the person that doesn't do any of this, should they just skip tissue sampling, Evans, and go straight to sap?
Well, that's a good question. I think so. I think you're going to learn more quicker. And if you're trying to just make adjustments in a short amount of time, sap will give you that insight and you can start making adjustments fairly soon.
All right, Clint, same sort of question. Is tissue sampling, like, okay, no sampling is the rotary dial phone. You don't even know what that is because you're too young. Tissue sampling is the flip phone, and sap sampling is the latest iPhone 15. Yes?
Yeah, I think it's a good place just to skip right to it because I think there's a lot more information in a sap report than a tissue report.
Do I get the same investment? Same cost?
No, sap's more expensive.
Because it's more thorough.
Yep.
Do I need to pull as many sap samples?
I think when you start out, it's probably good to start doing a regimented schedule, whether that's every week or every 2 weeks. I think Clint and I've talked about, as you get down the pipeline, can you just do it when you want to go make an application? I think that's in the cards once you understand your specific farming operation and what it's telling you. But out the gate, I think you kind of want to get a good idea of what's going on.
What about sap samples per field? I got an 80-acre field of corn out here. Am I grabbing it from one place, or do I have to grab it from 12 places? Do I mix them all together? Talk about, Clint, the actual process.
Yeah, so like on most of the farmers I work with and on our own farm, we limit it because it's expensive. I think the value is, like Mike said, pulling it every week, every other week. So I'm going to pull, say, my manure ground versus my conventional fertilizer ground. I'm going to pull my no-till acres versus maybe acres I'm still doing tillage on. I'm going to, pull the poor area versus the really good area or my average area.
And then you mix them.
No, I'm keeping those all separate by that location. But then I can get an idea of what extra value the manure ground holds versus a conventional fertilizer with DAP and potash and NH3. So for me, it's about looking at the different management strategies maybe you have within your farm, or the different yield ranges within your farm. If you got ground that only puts out 130, 40 bushel corn, and you got ground putting out 250, it's probably different challenges within the two different limiting factors.
So we're putting this we're sitting a refrigerated cooler. For God's sakes, Evans, you guys farm 7,500 acres. Plus, if you do this for any of your integrated ag solutions clientele, you're sending essentially a cooler every week, and then you got to try and put on the Ziploc, the Meyer farm, the Smith farm. I mean, is that what we're doing?
Yeah, we've the New Age Labs, the lab we work with, they do a really good job of giving you kind of what you need to do to perform a good sample. So, we've set up, boxes with insulation, you get those one-time use gel packs, you throw that in there, Ziplocs, you just, name them out before you head out. And it, after a couple of times, it really isn't too terrible at all. You kind of get used to it and get it rolling.
Number of times you perform a sap sample per season, Clint?
I think for most farmers, where Mike and I are trying to do a lot of changing and work with different products, we're pulling a lot before and after applications. I think that is a valuable thing for farmers, using sap to help validate products. I mean, we can see when we apply product X, whether, in a foliar pass, how much bump we get out of the sap. So I think that's valuable, pulling before and after an application, just to vet out the product more than just yield. But for us, I mean, I think most farmers, if you pulled 6 times a year on corn, 6 times a year on beans, you're going to get a decent trend from start to finish of what your dysfunctions are at different growth stages.
6 times. Evans?
Yeah, and I don't think that's any different than what a person pulling tissue would on some of the other programs. They're either biweekly or weekly. If we've done that before in the past. So I don't think the amount of times really changes a whole lot.
Well, you're pulling more samples than you actually can do treatments. You guys don't treat fertility 6 times. If it's fertility that we're looking for, we're not treating it. We're not treating it with each. We're not sampling it with each treatment because there's not 6 fertility treatments. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. But we'll make a couple apps out there, and it's good to kind of make sure that you're set. It gives you more data points to look at when you do that, other than just pulling 2 saps and then applying, because you want to make sure it's trending the right way. I mean, weather, environment does affect the saps. Maybe it would be too cloudy. I did pull one a couple of weeks ago. It was too cloudy and windy. And I did it on purpose just to see what the sap would tell me. Everything was low, but it was.
In other words, to see if you'd pulled a sap sample, you made a treatment based on what the sap told you, you did a prescription, and then a week later pulled the sap after the treatment to see if the treatment had taken.
Yep.
Okay. So essentially, you think when you say 6 times is the right number, Clint, you're saying really the one that tells you tells you where things are, and then you can do a prescription. And then the second one is to see if it worked.
Correct. Like, for instance, if I'm working with a farmer that's doing an in-furrow system, we may pull his in-furrow treatment versus where he didn't apply or left a check, to see, like, early on at B3, hey, what did we actually move here? If we're using, whether it's a biological program, a fertility program, is this getting into the plant? Is it the right form? So, I also think there's power in when you pull more samples per field per year, but pull less fields, we can build a trend. And then, Evans or I or other people in the industry can sit down with you and say, all right, here's a real issue that just stays from start to finish, or this issue only starts at R1. And what can we do at R1 next year to mitigate that risk? So that's why I'm a believer in pulling a few more. It's not that we're going to go out and make applications every time. Nobody could afford that. So
How much am I spending to do this?
Doing a new and an old sample is $100 per sample set. So you get one location, new and an old leaf is $100.
One location, meaning one farm?
Yeah. You went to the home farm and pulled one set of samples, that'd be one sample.
$100. $100. And that's 2 tests. So am I spending $300 then per farm at six samples?
600 per farm.
Yep.
Oh, I thought you said new and old. So I thought $100 got you before and after. Okay, you're saying
yeah.
Okay. So that's a 300 or 600?
One farm, one sample is $100. That gets you a new and an old sample.
Okay. So my point is, you're on one farm in the course of a year, you spend
how many samples you pull on that farm. So if you pull 6 times, it's $600.
So can the person listen to this that's being a little bit skeptical make a point here and say, good God, I don't know. I think I can lose a little bit of yield versus $600. It does seem a little, it's pricey.
It is. I mean, it is, but I think, I don't think, fertility is expensive. All the things coming to the marketplace and getting thrown at farmers is, I think this is a way to validate. Company X says they can do this to your plant. Well, can they? Okay. So it's a validation tool for me. I think that's how you get your ROI. And also, I think moving your fertility budget around, that's what I've been most eye-opened about, moving some things around. And I think it fits in.
So on a per acre basis, the point is it ends up being, call it $5-6 an acre on the sampling. And you're saying I can use that $5 to better apply fertility and make that $5 or $6 or $8 an acre, $10 an acre, whatever that is, right?
Yep. And case in point, Damien, we was always big on putting manganese on, especially after Roundup, different applications, because it was tying up. What we found with sap was we don't really have a manganese problem. That for me that just for a lot of farmers I work with, that was just gone. We don't have that problem in our area. So
same, Evans, I'm guessing you've got the same thing where at first you and Kelly always sit down and talk about the money. You more the fertility, him more about the money, and then you said, I think we should do this. And then after the first year of doing it, did you look at the numbers and say, oh my God, we were blowing money and unnecessarily on whatever, manganese, magnesium, zinc, whatever. Was there 1 or 2 things that you found you had unnecessarily been applying?
Yeah. I mean, we always chased phosphorus. We're not chased phosphorus. We never chased phosphorus. Kelly Tissue always told us we were high. And going back to what Clint said, we never really worried about it. We went after different nutrients. Now you get sap back and you're looking at your phosphorus being deficient and you're like, oh boy. But it never shows up in the tissue, at least for us in Kelly's area. So it's really focused us back into a different program.
Got it. So the point is your sap investment, you've been able to move the money from unnecessarily applying things to the sampling, and you're ahead.
Yeah, we'll go after phosphorus a little bit more heavily than we would in our nitrogen passes now.
Yeah. Get me out of here. Last thoughts on sap versus tissue. So the point is tissue dead? Are you done tissue sampling, Clint Frese?
From my business standpoint, no, but on my farm, yes. From a business standpoint, but I think
if someone hires you, you'll do it. But on your own acres, you're saying the train's moved on. It's now it's the next thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you have customers that want that you try and talk out of tissue sampling and move on to the sap, and they're just not ready? Is there reluctance? Is that the problem?
Not really. I think that's been the most powerful is I work with the farmer and I make a recommendation to apply this program or this product with a herbicide pass or whatever pass it is. And we come back and retest with sap and they see what we did to the nutrient levels. That has been a powerful tool for farmers to actually validate it out. And I think, we're at farmers, we get thrown these, me and Mike was talking about this the other day, a lot of NPK micronutrient foliar options are $60 a gallon. You apply a pint, it's supposed to take care of everything. Well, what we kind of found out is that those don't register at a pint. A pint per acre, if you think about it, we're now moving on to how can we go after nitrogen or phosphorus in a big way. spend the same money at the end of the day, but actually target what our problem is.
You're nodding your head, Evan. So the point is, this has given you a much clearer picture. Not farming, not far. Not, we're farming more advanced now because of tissue sample, because sap sampling.
Yeah, I mean, to Clint's point, he's, the old products we used to use and felt pretty good about, and you watch them in the sap, and it's like we don't have a near enough of them. Like take copper, for instance, or a zinc, and you're just like, oh my, I'm not getting enough in it anyway. So it really makes you rethink of what you're recommending or what you need to go after.
From a cost standpoint, I'm sure that's still one of the challenges, especially when you got a little bit of a down revenue year. So when you, if you were working with a customer or if you were being a hired consultant, whatever, how much am I spending on tissue sampling? You said it was $600, for instance, with the sap. Is tissue half of that?
Yeah, I'd say half or a third. I would say, to do the same samples in tissues, probably a third, a couple $100 a field to take you 6 samples through the season. But I think it's the value, like the being able to measure what we're doing and weed things out, products and bring in new things. I mean, we've completely changed what we use for as recommendations to the grower.
Got it. All right. Last thing I need to know, Mike Evans, you're in your 3rd year of doing it. What have you learned in those 3rd years? So the person that says, all right, I'm going to try this. I believe these guys. I think this is smart. What have you learned in 3 years that the person that's going to try it for the first time is going to need to know right now?
I think you need to have an open mind and really put effort into doing it through the season. It's a little overwhelming. I'm sure Clint will agree. When you first go down this path, there's a lot of information getting thrown at you, a lot of data coming at you, and you get overwhelmed pretty easy. But just stay the course. And once you get through about a handful of samples and maybe through the season, it'll definitely come out clear at the end, and you can start really pinpointing things you need to work on.
Yeah. I'm thinking that maybe the person needs to start with 4 of their fields, not all of their fields or something like that, because it could probably be a little bit. I have a feeling that the big problem, not the big problem, the big revelation, the big reveal, is, like you said, Clint, oh my God, for years, Dad told me we should do this. We came out and did this, and the SAP tells us it was unnecessary. I think that's going to be the big one, yeah, for most people.
It is. It's maybe reallocating some dollars and better spending, and not in every geography and environment's different. That's one thing I've been kind of eye-open as we pull these, and in southern Indiana and Missouri versus Nebraska versus where Mike's at, we see similarities, but then we also see some big differences. So that's different. I think we get to talking in generalities in ag where everything's the same for everybody, and it's not really the case.
Yeah. So on an average, then, just the last thing I need to know about the sample. Am I pulling, is like one sample every 40 acres adequate, or is it one sample every 10 acres? What do you think you do? And I mean, you got a lot of acres to cover.
Yeah, I usually just go on a field and try to find either, we pick a trouble spot, or we look for the good spot or an average spot. That's kind of what, that's how we delineate, and we just go take one sample, or we take 2 sample sets in 2 different locations to get some comparisons.
Got it. All right. Anything else, Clint?
Yeah, just to reiterate that. I mean, I think I take my dad's and brother's farm. We're pulling 3 fields of corn, 3 fields of beans across our total acres, probably spending $1.50 average across our entire operation from start to finish. So this does not have to be per acre across your entire operation an expensive thing.
Got it. That puts things in perspective. So, and you can pretty well easily, a couple bucks an acre at most, you're talking, and you can easily make an adjustment that saves you or makes you that.
Right. Yep.
Even at $4 corn, Evans?
Oh yeah. I think you can get a lot of opportunity to learn and see what you don't need to spend.
Yeah, that's what I think the answer is. The person that's saying, well, I'm staring down beans that are in the $10 to $11 range. Corn might have a 3 in front of it. I don't know if I can be justifying it. Maybe that's the best time to justify this, because you can definitely make the treatment that you stop over treating, I guess, is the big one there.
Yep, I think so. I think reallocation or even cutting back when we can. I think it's looking at it from lots of angles, not just let's spend more money on this entire crop. So
His name's Clint Frese. The company's called BioAg Management. He's not unlike most Illinois people. They complain about how good they got it over there. They complain about their soil. They complain about, I mean, they should complain about Chicago probably, but they don't complain about that. It's just, well, they do that too. Anyway, his name's Clint Frese. The company's called BioAg Management. He's joined by Mike Evans with Integrated Ag Solutions and an awesome dude there at Garland Cattle. Till next time, thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
thank you.
We'll be covering this some more because this is kind of a topic that I think deserves more. We're going to be doing some more videos on this, so stay tuned. But you know what? We covered it for you because I think this is a hot thing, and we'll be digging into it more, I promise. Tissue sampling, sap sampling. That's what we talked about here today. My name is Damian Mason. Thanks for joining us on Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out extremeag.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation. Cutting the Curve is brought to you by Simon Innovations. Don't let your sprayer's limitations hold you back. Visit simoninnovations.com and upgrade your sprayer's capabilities now.